Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the test screening. My name is Chloe,
And my name is Billy.
and we're going to kick off today with a discussion about the Cannes Film Festival. We're getting pretentious. We're getting into this indie festival where people clap for 10 minutes for no good reason. And
I've never really understood that.
I've never understood it. Why are you clapping for so long? Why is it a thing? Why does it happen?
I feel like I personally feel like it's partially because it's the big one. It's the one that's kind of reserved almost exclusively for film industry professionals. Everyone who is everyone in the film industry is there. And I kind of feel like, they all want to see their friends do well. They all want to see their peers do well. And I do feel like the 8 to 10 minute standing ovation is kind of them all just sucking off each other's egos a bit.
It is a bit. I would be so embarrassed as well. I'd be like, no, stop.
So it's like, no, really, guys, we can stop now.
Yeah, it's like,
I think it's also kind of...
After 2 minutes, I got it. I got the message after 2 minutes.
I think it's also kind of partially down to... It's kind of I've heard critics describe it as kind of a feverish experience where, everyone's kind of sleep deprived. There's so many parties, so many interviews, so many press conferences, so many kind of strange celebrity activities going on, whether it's kind of Lars von Trier sort of spouting really weird controversial rhetoric during a press conference, and there's kind of a lot of contributing factors, or like the controversy around a particular film, whether that's kind of Kids with Harmony Korine in the 90s, or the new Lars von Trier film, or the new Donald Trump film. I think critics have sometimes said it's very difficult at times to give a sound, objective judgment on a film because you've got all this sort of extraneous festival noise going on, and you kind of got the atmosphere in the room and the screenings that kind of contributes to that. So interesting kind of just reading about the nuances that contribute to your perspective on the films that go on at the festival.
So what are some of the films that are being talked about this year? What are kind of the big releases that you're hearing in the ether, the film critic network, mind network that I know you're plugged into?
Yeah, so we've got Francis Ford Coppola's long-awaited. He's been trying to get this thing made for decades. I think it's either at least partially funded or almost exclusively funded through $120 million of his own money. It's called Megalopolis. I think story-wise, it's still, like, actual plot details, I think, are still proving fairly elusive. But it's a science fiction drama. And, I mean, the IMDb sort of plot synopsis kind of reads it as an architect wants to rebuild New York City as a utopia following a devastating disaster. That's actually a lot more succinct than I've sort of heard about it so far. And maybe kind of interesting considering the current political climate of the US. What I am currently hearing, I mean, if you look at the Letterboxd curve, it's just, there are bumps on the curve at every single rating point. I've seen bad, I've seen masterpiece claims. It is really kind of running the gambit of critical responses, that one. So, I mean, considering Francis Ford Coppola, made The Godfather the conversation, I'll obviously be hotly anticipating it however it turns out, and I'm very glad he got to make it because it seems like a real passion project of his. But I am sort of hearing a lot of talk that it is very pretentious and kind of very bloated and overblown. And there's a new one from Kevin Costner called Horizon: An American Saga that got a very big standing ovation. There's the Trump film, which is The Apprentice, where Sebastian Stan is playing a younger Donald Trump. There are people who are kind of investors in the film who know Trump, who kind of invested thinking it was going to be a flattering portrayal of him, and having seen a cut of the film, have since become furious. A cease and desist has been sent to the filmmakers while at Cannes.
That's kind
threatening
of
legal action. Yeah, which is hilarious, which just is making everyone online on Twitter, the general public, just go, well, now we just want to see it infinitely more. Thanks for the free publicity, Donny. And they're kind of trying to find a distributor at the Cannes marketplace. So I'll be interested to see if that
It'll be
how that
interesting to
goes.
know. Do you think it'll be distributed during the election campaign, or do you think there will be some legal implications to doing that? Because I know that in
I
the UK we have things slightly differently. Like, there are TV channels can't really talk much about the election while there's an election on. We can't really be like interviewing people or being too one-sided during the time of the election, so not to influence public opinion. So I'd be curious to know, because I don't think over here, we couldn't have a Rishi Sunak film or being made and released now that a general election is being called. So do you think it'll be like one of those that comes out later? Do you think, or I don't know, what's it like in America?
Perhaps. I mean, the kind of the news and political situation in America just strikes me as being far more chaotic than and unruly than that of
You're
the
not
United
wrong, to
Kingdom.
be honest. I'm just like, yeah, no, it
So,
fully would be released during during this
I mean,
time.
I don't think it is a sure thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen. I think Trump's people are going to battle to make sure it doesn't. But I think, yeah, I could see it going either way. Either way, I will be very interested to see how it views him. I've heard it's a lot more sort of tempered and measured, than it's not as incendiary as I think people expected it to be, but it's still apparently quite damning. And Sebastian Stan's performance is apparently very good. Jeremy Strong, big up Kendall Roy, go Succession. He is in this, as is Maria Bakalova, who I'm a fan of. So
Good cast.
I'm excited. Yeah, it's a good cast, and apparently they're a really, really solid on-screen trio. So I'm gonna be really interested to see how that turns out. Andrea Arnold has a new film coming out called
Ooh.
Birds. I
Okay,
don't
is
know
this
if
the one that you thought that I was going to be excited about? Because you're
well,
correct.
that one. There's another. There's another. I think you'll
Okay,
be
there's
even
another
more
one later.
excited for.
Okay, but
I don't know
Andrew
tremendous
Arnold,
amount.
sorry, go into this one first.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I don't have a lot to add about the Andrea Arnold one. I think it's kind of, other than it's kind of going back to her working class sort of working class sort of London life. A bit of kitchen sink realism, which Fish Tank, Red Road, that's not a tremendous surprise coming from her stylistically due to her her background, her filmmaking background. But she's kind of apparently flirting with magical realism in this one,
Ooh.
which greatly excites me. I think that could be a really interesting kind of addition to her normal kind of gritty representation of that sector of British life. So that excites me tremendously, and also I'm just a big fan of hers in general. So yes, to a new Andrea Arnold film. This one will make you even more excited. There is a new Sean Baker film on the horizon.
Yes. That is very exciting. Very exciting. Tell
This
me
is
more.
called Honora, and it focuses on an exotic dancer whose life is kind of upheaved by a kooky and very affluent, rich son of a Russian billionaire. And I think it's kind of about how their relationship unfolds, and it seems. I mean, his previous work, Red Rocket, Tangerine, and most notably the Florida Project, seem to delve into sort of the very sort of gritty recesses of working class American life in areas. I mean, some interesting crossover there with Andrea Arnold. There, it's something obviously very much US based with Sean Baker. With things like the Florida Project taking place sort of at the periphery of Disneyland in that sort of very sort of rundown and problematic motel. This one seems kind of, from what I'm seeing in the promotional images, a lot of fireworks. It seems more sort of vibrant and sort of flamboyant than, at least the images I'm seeing, than some of his previous work. But that focus on potentially kind of complex and sort of seemingly quite abrasive characters does seem to be carrying over here. So I'm excited for that. And kind of two final films, which aren't, well, one is by a director that I'm aware of. The other isn't. There's a film called Gazer, which is a debut by an electrician turned filmmaker, a guy called Ryan J. Sloan. And it's co-written and starring his partner, Ariella Mastroianni, and it's described as a very paranoid Alfred Hitchcock and David Lynch inflected thriller. It's about a woman who's struggling to perceive how much time has elapsed, and that just, I mean, it already sounds like a very interesting premise, and
It sounds
the
like
fact
me
that
day to day. What time is it? Oh, shit.
mine too, just with
Just
my
like,
with my
wait.
dyspraxia.
Oh, no. Half the day is gone. Where did it go?
Are we going to find this intensely triggering?
Yeah, I think we're going to take it quite personally.
Yeah, I feel personally attacked by this, guys. Thanks very much, Ryan and Ariella. But I think it's a real marvel that this is playing in Cannes, despite the fact that, and you know, it's apparently it's a very accomplished first feature. It's made independently, and they have no formal screenwriting or directing training, apparently. And apparently it's oozing filmmaking confidence. So that tremendously excites me. And then finally, the final piece of work I want to talk about is the one that seems, I think it's in competition for the Palme d'Or, and it's the one that there's always one film at Cannes that really captures kind of people's minds in that it's love it or hate it. It's really kind of outrageous. It's very provocative and kind of almost stomach churning and sort of stomach testing in certain instances. And you know, every Cannes Film Festival has one, and it's called The Substance. It's a French film starring Demi Moore, and which is great because I haven't seen her in anything for ages.
You know,
so great to see her back
somebody
on screen.
once said that I looked like Demi Moore, and I don't, but I took the compliment.
I was like, yeah, take that compliment for all it's worth.
Flattering.
I would be very flattered if that was me.
I was very flattered. I
mean,
flattered.
damn.
It's a lie, but damn, you know, I'll take it. I'll take anything like that. Thank you. Sorry, carry on. I just, you know, yes, just for pure ego reasons, I need to bring that up whenever.
Yeah, it should absolutely be mentioned, 100%. Directed by, written and directed by Coralie Forgier, a French director. It's her second film. I recently watched her first film, Revenge, which was a slightly radical kind of reframing take on the rape revenge thriller. And whilst it wasn't, you know, an amazing film, it was very solid, and it was really great to see a female directed and female perspective take on a subsection of the horror genre that's normally typically very problematic, objectifying, and in some cases very misogynistic. You think about things like I Spit on Your Grave as sort of like the real sort of, you know, bottom of the barrel in that regard. And so she's so I like that film very much. Sees tremendous potential, and apparently this is a new body horror film, which, you know, is a genre of horror that I love. You know, I think going back to my, you know, infatuation with David Cronenberg's work, which obviously seems to be an influence here, and also, you know, Palme d'Or winner of recent years, Titan, and Raw, you know, the Julia Ducournau French language cannibal centric thriller a few years ago that was very popular, which I think also played at Cannes, might have won a jury prize, I'm not sure. So French horror seems to be doing some really interesting things at the moment, and this new body horror is apparently just very, very gruesome and very provocative. And you know, reading this report here, it says Demi Moore is really well cast as an aging Hollywood star who takes a black market drug to create a younger version of herself. So interesting thematically going on there, kind of like appearance versus reality, kind of longing for youth in an industry that does kind of have a history of objectifying people and predominantly women. And apparently it culminates in a sequence that says it needs to be experienced with a crowd. So I imagine a lot of cringing, a lot of groaning, a lot of maybe leaving of the auditorium. So the prospect of that very much excites me. And I watched David Cronenberg's Crash recently, which is often compared to Titan, and I loved that. I loved that film. I thought it was fantastic. Maybe the best thing I think David Cronenberg's ever done. So yes, I'm very much.
It just gives me just give me the I can't. I don't deal with it very well. Anything that's like, oh, you know, just things on the body not being where they should. It just gets
It's
it just gets to me.
it's a tough one. It's definitely really makes you squirm, but I like that characteristic of it. And I like its ability to use that to say things about our sort of view of each other and our appearance, our perspectives on ourselves. So that is perhaps the one that excites me the most. But yeah, some really interesting things and perspective releases coming out of Cannes 2024.
Interesting. So we're now going to go into our reviews, and this first one is a special one because it was a special request made by my housemate. Hi Josh, I know you're listening. And so this is Kung Fu Hustle, and me and Josh watched this a couple of months ago now. We had like a bit of a movie night, and he was slightly nervous to show it to me because he was like, I don't know if this is as funny or as fun as I remember it being. And I have the same fear whenever I try and show something to someone. I'm like, here's my baby, please don't be mean to it. But then when I watch it, I'm like, oh, what have I subjected you to for hours? I'm sorry. But this, I really enjoyed this. It's absolutely insane, and I can't wait to know what you thought of it, because I had a really good time with the absolute absurdity of it.
Oh, I very much share your opinion on Kung Fu Hustle. Before we get into specifics, bit of background. So, Chinese martial arts action comedy slash parody from 2004. So, wow, it's 20 years old at this stage. And it's essentially a parody of wuxia films. So, Chinese martial arts cinema, whereby there is that kind of have very elegant, poetic, grandiose kind of storylines and execution with their music and their performance styles that often tend to defy the laws of physics very elegantly, with characters sort of flying and running up walls during martial arts fight sequences, kind of very complex narratives revolving around sort of ulterior motives in relationships and sort of very sort of disparate family and empirical connections in sort of like Chinese dynasty type situations. Most famously, probably the one that most people would clearly identify as being from that genre would be Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Also, Hero would be another notable example of the film. Also, House of Flying Daggers. So we're parodying that. We're in that sort of territory here comedically. And Kung Fu Hustle essentially revolves around a wannabe gangster who wants to, in an effort to prove he is a suitable candidate to join a gang by the name of the Axe Gang, a very feared criminal enterprise in China. He attempts to wreak havoc and take out the sort of the leaders of a very sort of run-down Chinese village, affectionately named Pigsty. And this, in a hilarious turn of events, it turns out that the people of this village are quite a bit more martial arts equipped than people had previously expected. And the guy and, by extension, the gang get way more than they bargained for. And it's a real ride. It has some of the, I mean, the defying, the way Kung Fu Hustle defies the laws of physics makes something like the Fast and Furious films look like a well-oiled Albert Einstein experiment. It's just that scene that I sent you an excerpt of me watching it, where they're running at about 600 miles an hour with just the little spinning leg animations along this road.
Like Scooby-Doo.
It really did. You expect the little kind of clicking sound effects as they're running, and it was like Sonic the Hedgehog on speed. It was just absolutely hysterically funny, and I think the thing that really worked for me about it was that it's got this really great combination of it's shot quite well, actually. It's filmed in widescreen, so it looks like 239:1, and it seems like the director has a real good. He's a really kind of solid and stylish filmmaker in his own right, visually, with kind of what he does with what he does with the sound, how he sort of puts together very well constructed, very refined action sequences from an editing and sort of cinematography perspective. But he clearly has a real love for an affection and real good stylistic hold and grasp on the filmic DNA of Chinese martial arts and wuxia cinema. You know, the way just the weird Dutch angles, the zoom in on people's faces, they kind of give each other like a bombastic side eye look during a fight as they prepare to run at each other. All the assortment of objects that are thrown at each other, the running up walls, the absurd like flying and defying of physics. There's a scene where a character like literally moves up into the clouds, and then his hand kind of like not even quadruples, it turns into like galaxy size and then kind of rushes down. It does this with like really, I mean, deliberately horrendous CGI, but it's kind of like it's got that element of stylistic heft, which means that the elements of it that look very wonky are very deliberately wonky and kind of comedically fit, because we very much register that as audiences. Oh, this is kind of deliberately played as ridiculous so that it's a send up of these aspects of the film, the genre that it's parodying. I think with things sometimes with parodies like Scary Movie, the parody of the horror genre, or Not Another Teen Movie, or just things like that, they're so goofy and they're so wonkily acted and shoddily performed that it kind of, the whole film just sort of gets entrenched in the shoddiness in quality, rather than actually making some pointed and sort of funny takes on the genre that it's trying to lampoon. And the way it kind of plot wise and structurally takes swipes at the genre. Like, I love the fact that the working class Chinese sort of characters are sort of given the heroic and sort of weaponry status in this film that they are. But also, I just love the fact that the guy who's clearly very, would normally be like the upstanding sort of stylish hero in these side of films, is just portrayed as a total goofball, and his complete and utter incompetence and the chaos he ends up causing in the village by proxy gets the attention of the very gang he's trying to become a part of, and then they have to wade in and clear up his mess, and then they end up getting their asses totally handed to them by this village. I think for all that, I mean, you could look at any sort of number of scenes in this in a vacuum and go, just what is this? This is just totally goofy. This is totally out of whack. But actually, you know, you look at some of the fight choreography, which is in places legitimately quite well executed, and then also just plot wise, the way it's kind of just clearly very sort of smugly poking fun at the plot machinations of Chinese martial arts films. I just think it's low key, very smart, and also just totally wholeheartedly embraces goofiness and just turns that up to absolute 11. But has some really interesting sort of comedic, pointed, stylish foundations that give the comedy intent. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a really, really good time. I wish more parody films were embraced absurdity this much and also had the intelligent foundation that this does as well.
That's the thing that I think works the most for me about it as well. That it takes not being serious so seriously.
Yeah,
you know, everyone plays it straight, and everybody's like fully kind of immersed in it. The lady with the rollers is, what a character. What a iconic. I don't know. Wuxia films are, it is a genre that I enjoy. It's something that I can quite happily watch just because I enjoy the set pieces and things like that. And yeah, they're a little bit cringe at times, but I do like the fights have to be good. And I enjoyed quite a lot of the action sequences in this. It kind of made me think a little bit of, you know, like Scott Pilgrim-y kind of things. Like, that's another film that takes things kind of to an extreme and you know, messes around with them, and I think that this feels like something kind of in that vein. Yeah, it's great fun. It's a good
Yeah.
popcorn film for sure.
It really is. I imagine seeing this in a cinema at the time would have
Oh
been an
hell yeah! Can you
absolute
imagine
riot.
midnight screening Kung Fu Hustle? I'm there. You know
Incredible.
what? Give me the tickets now.
Yeah.
I'll
If it
go.
ever if it ever happens, we are going. One last thing that did actually occur to me while watching it as well, and people have made this comparison as well, is that there's a lot of slapstick gags in this that feel in their kind of, again, ridiculousness, and also just how they're taking kind of what would be a very intelligent approach to a fight scene or a situation, and then just having that totally backfire in someone's face repeatedly and very comedically. It reminded me of like old silent comedies, like Charlie Chaplin, like Buster Keaton, like that whole gag when they're at the alleyway and they're staring at their opponents, like the guys in the village, and they're attempting to throw throwing knives at the villagers, but they end up sticking them in each other's shoulders, and the guys that are throwing them, they end up like completely misfiring and having them hit in each other's like stomachs and shoulders, and then they're just absolutely just going off at each other because they're so annoyed. Just stuff like that. It reminded me of, to an extent, just the way some of the set pieces are choreographed comedically, with also just the very large scale sets as well. It just reminded me of old silent comedies, which I think is another big feather in its cap.
They don't do them like that anymore. You know, like there's something about physical comedy that I think we need to bring back. Bring it back, because I do enjoy it. Like visual gags are probably one of my favorite kinds of gags, especially when people like have a knack for it or have a talent for it. Like actors that can do physical comedy very well. I'm like, that's an actor right there. Like that is,
Yeah.
creme de la creme. If you can, pull off something like that and make me believe it, or have the timing to kind of pull a visual gag off like that. And there's multiple examples of that in this film that tickled me, that really made me chuckle.
Yeah. The Kung Fu Hustle cinematic universe, let's get it going. The second coming
Absolutely.
of silent cinema
I think
in
there was meant to
the
be
form.
a of Kung Fu Hustle.
Really?
I think there was meant to be a sequel or something at some point. I think we looked at that. There was like a supposed sequel that was meant to come out in like 2008 or something, and it never happened. Absolute travesty. We could
Tragedy.
be cinematic universe deep by now if the
We really
filmmakers
could. We could be
had got their
Marvel
asses
deep.
together. We could be. There could be like so many spin-offs. That lady with the rollers, she could have her own movie by now. We've been
The
robbed.
landlady. I feel very hard done by. Come on, guys. Get it. Crowdfund it. Kickstarter. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it. We can make it happen. We've got to move on now. And we're going to talk about, I've been quite excited for this, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Is this a prequel or a sequel to Fury Road? My mind
It's a
says
prequel.
prequel. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the character was obviously played by Charlize Theron in Fury Road, and is now being played by Anna Taylor-Joy, who I love. We love Queen's Gambit and stuff like that. I've no doubt that she can pull a part like this off, but I'm interested to know what you thought of it.
So prequel to the modern action classic Mad Max Fury Road. Director George Miller is back in the director's chair for this one, which is good to see. Good to see that that there's continuity directorially with the material, and it's not just being piled off to another director in an attempt to sort of cheaply expand this out into a franchise. I don't share the opinion that Mad Max Fury Road is God's gift to cinema, like some people do. But I do think it's great, and I think it's incredible quality and impact on the modern landscape of action cinema that shouldn't be overstated. It brought back, practical effects and really epic stunt work with a vengeance, really, in a way that we hadn't seen in that genre for a long time. And I think it showed that pure pedal to the metal, explosive chaos, and action like that, it can be bolstered with really expert choreography and serious filmmaking finesse, and bringing sheer thunderous entertainment back to the forefront of this genre. It was just enough narrative and character in it to get us involved with the people who were doing all the car flips and the explosions and the running and the jumping. but it really did bring that sort of vehicular mayhem and explosive chaos to the forefront. So it's, and I've seen it twice. I rewatched it recently, having seen it first at the time it came out, and thoroughly enjoyed it even more the second time around. I think it's an excellent film, and it won 6 Academy Awards. Production design, sound, editing.
6? I didn't realise it won that many.
Yeah, it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director. It didn't win those, but it won both sound Oscars, because at the time it was still when we were doing 2 sound Oscars. Production design, costume, makeup, and editing. That was what it won, and all of which I think are richly deserved.
I think it's quite rare for an action film to be nominated for that many categories, to be honest, especially like not in the modern landscape.
Yeah, so naturally, so it's a big deal for that reason as well, and naturally kind of going into Furiosa, expectations were high, as was mine. Now, the prospect of expanding this universe, it's not an instant turn off for me, but given my previous recent rewatch of Fury Road, I did feel like it's not structurally perfect. It's maybe 10 minutes too long, but it's still very, very tight for the most part, and it does feel actually quite brilliantly self-contained and neat with its conclusion and its storytelling. And so for that reason, I didn't necessarily feel like it was screaming for a sequel or a prequel. I feel like it really could have just existed on its own. But Furiosa is a very enigmatic and grizzled and interesting character. And past sequels and prequels to cinema classics have shown there is more kind of gas in the proverbial narrative tank. I think Trainspotting 2, Blade Runner 2049, things like that. So I went in with an open mind, and unfortunately I was very disappointed, which was a surprise to me, because I heard good things coming out of Cannes. I've heard good things online from critics and fans, but yeah, it just didn't quite work for me. And I knew going into this that previous reviews and talk out of Cannes had shown that George Miller's directorial approach to Furiosa was, in a good sign to me, markedly different from that of Fury Road, which I think is obviously needed. I think that's essential. With such a rip-roaring revitalization of the Mad Max universe, how could you live up to trying to imitate that and sort of just rehash it? But I think in trying to make something, atmospherically distinct from the previous outing, what's actually happened is the blandness has just rocketed, and any personality and energy out of the story has actually been, quite surprisingly, actually completely siphoned out of it. And I think one of the biggest sins it commits is that for a film titled Furiosa, and which is largely supposedly centered around sort of unpacking the prior context for her character, it actually seems pretty disinterested in her. And Anya Taylor-Joy, which again is a big surprise to me, Anya Taylor-Joy as the older Furiosa, it takes 65 minutes for her to turn up.
Really?
Yeah, she's not in it until I think it's like an hour and 4 minutes. I think I looked, because I was thinking, and I looked at my watch. It was an hour and 5 minutes after the film started before she comes in. And I go, okay, that's not on paper necessarily a bad thing. I can appreciate the attempt to grant the child stage in the character's life more screen time and development, which is, in essence, is what it's trying to do. But even then, in the earlier, when, we see Furiosa as a child, she's relegated to the sidelines in that section of the film. She has very few lines. The introductory tragedy with her and her mother is, I think, cliche at best for the post-apocalyptic genre. And and for the majority of that section of the film, which is almost half of the 2 hour and 20-minute runtime, she just doesn't have much of a presence. Instead, we're presented with a Chris Hemsworth performance, who, at the start, I thought, okay, he's actually getting some good rein to flex his range and his acting muscles a bit. We're not in Thor mode, we're not in general Chris Hemsworth territory here. But the more it went on, the more I'm just like, this is just very solidly hanging in the register of a smugly antagonistic pantomime villain. And it doesn't, and when the villains who were sort of reprising their roles from Fury Road turn up, we're given very little in the way of extra explanation there as to their relationships. And that entire section of the film, it feels like a lot of very meandering factional scheming that I don't even think really informs the conflict we then see in Fury Road or Furiosa's growth into the character we already know. So in a narrative sense, starts off as being very uneventful and very ungratifying, and does improve somewhat in the second half, but there are also technical and directorial issues, I think, that hamper even kind of the baseline entertainment level of this. And, you think about Fury Road and how rigorously thrilling it was, and how there was such a keen emphasis on the practical stunt work, the human element of the action. It all felt very muscular, very kind of personalized. It felt like this was all being made to happen by people on screen. But obviously because so much of it was done practically. And, every explosion, every car crash, every metallic clang, it was so gritty and forceful and just feverishly entertaining. And then you have Fury Road could win the prize for the most orange film ever made. The searing view of the desert, it's retina scorching. It's so sun-drenched, it's unreal. But Furiosa, it doesn't have a fraction of that kind of frenetic rhythm that Fury Road has in the way the fight scenes are executed or the driving sequences are executed. And so many of the stunts and settings are either very clearly assisted by some unconvincing CGI and aren't actually being pulled off as stunts, or there's some glaringly obvious and not very appealing green screen, which just feels like, and that's not to say that Fury Road didn't have CGI, but the CGI in that was superb. You think about that amazing sandstorm in it, but Furiosa just isn't a patch on that. And in the color palette, it's largely washed out. It's lifeless. It doesn't have the character and personality visually that Fury Road did. To give some praise, I think Anya Taylor-Joy is great. She's really well cast here. She can convey that quiet, brooding ferocity in the character that Charlize Theron introduced really effortlessly. And I think we've said this about her before, and other people have as well. She does eye acting better than almost anyone I can think of. She can play an entire scene with just her eyes. A lot of her character is often covered by because of the sand. A lot of her forehead and her mouth and nose are covered, so a lot of the time she is just playing scenes off with her eyes, and off the time with a minimum of dialogue. So she does that really well, but even she can't really save this from being as meandering and bloated, and at worst as tedious as it is. And I can sum up really the main crux of what's wrong with this pretty succinctly by saying the action has been considerably stripped back in an effort to make this a more introspective, kind of inward-looking, character-based entry in the series. But the cardinal sin has been committed of both neglecting the titular protagonist in what should be a story, really focused in on her, and not providing even a quarter of the dramatic meat or depth of character examination that you need to make this worthwhile as an apocalyptic drama, rather than in an unbelievably direct and furious action film like Fury Road was. Feeling the C on this. It was kind of a slog to get through. Not terrible, not the worst thing I've seen this year, but was hard work, and I was let down by it.
Basically, go rewatch Fury Road instead.
Yeah, just Fury Road. Leave it at that. You're really not going to add much to your understanding and appreciation of the story by delving into this.
So, moving on, we're doing a big 180 now to If, which is a film that I've seen advertised on my Instagram too much. I don't know why the algorithm... Well, is it the algorithm, or is it just, they're really trying to push this? This is giving me Space Jam vibes. And not in a good way.
In there.
I don't think I've stayed long enough to really watch the trailers to really get... I mean, as far as I understand, this is about imaginary friends being real and coming back to kind of haunt you as an adult, right? Is that kind of on the lines? Is it Ryan Reynolds? Ryan Reynolds in this?
Ryan Reynolds is in this. I believe she's called is it Kaylee Fleming? Kaylee Fleming? But Judith from The Walking Dead is a young girl who's Kaylee Fleming. She plays a young girl who is moving into her grandmother's apartment while her dad awaits heart surgery and her mother has previously died from cancer. That's not a plot spoiler. It occurs in the flashback within the first few minutes of the film. So there is an element of sort of grief in her past and an element of having to grow up very fast during in her life. She's quite a precocious young character. And there's sort of some tension and some worry around if her dad's surgery is going to go okay. And she's somewhat conflicted around, trying to be serious, but also, the dad's saying, you need some fun in your life. You need to still remember that you're a kid and that just because I'm in here doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to find some joy in life. And then she's stunned, but she's also trying to remain strong and kind of stoic in the face of potential tragedy. And along comes the imaginary friends of the title. It's essentially what the title means there, and they refer to each other as ifs. And she meets this Ryan Reynolds character and they are the only two who can see their imaginary friends, and they essentially kind of interact with the imaginary friends and go on a sort of an adventure to sort of try and facilitate the rekindling of relationships with these sort of displaced imaginary friends with the older people, older as in sort of in adulthood now, people who have forgotten about them. And so essentially trying to sort of rejuvenate and reintroduce joy back into these sort of jaded individuals' lives. And yes, there's some Space Jam, there's some Inside Out, bit of Who Framed Roger Rabbit if we want to go back that far. And I was gonna say, like you, I was worried about this. I was like, I don't know if this is really gonna work. That CGI, I don't know if that's really working for me in the trailer. But I was kind of interested in the prospect of, because I feel like it's the kind of almost Disney Pixar Hollywood. I mean, it's not made by them, but it's written and directed and produced and starring John Krasinski. But it's kind of adjacent to that kind of Disney Pixar Hollywood tearjerker that I think we could do more of. I don't think there's any harm in having, an emotive connection between live action human stories and the fantastical that parents and children can kind of connect to and sort of share in the syrup-drenched sentimentality of it all. I don't think there's any harm in that every once in a while. And I went in knowing the critical reception had been pretty mixed, had been pretty lukewarm in some areas. And I was skeptical of how well the live action animation was going to work, because I think it's a fusion that can be very easy to get wrong. And I have to say that whilst it is flawed, it was able to win me over fairly quickly. And that was largely down to the way it was directed for me. It opens with some I was kind of caught almost off guard by the opening, because it opens with some very tactile, very kind of moving, almost stream of consciousness style, handheld shot flashbacks, and the family playing together while the mother is still alive, and they flow really beautifully with like this gleefully euphoric family games that are being played in these introductory flashbacks. And I think in general, the way the camera inquisitively kind of peers around doorways and corners, kind of beautifully glides across family photos, kind of steadily pans across rooms during dialogue scenes, it has that very kind of endearing childlike perspective to it. And the entire atmosphere of the film is very pillowy. It's visually quite straightforward, but we're not getting into any, outside of that opening sequence, we're not getting into any particularly wacky framing or anything like that. But there's an elegance in execution that did kind of make me swoon, even with how unabashedly twinkly the score is. It really does. I'm like, did actual fairies compose the music to this? Because if I hear another friggin' twinkle, I think I might scream. It does almost feel, the music, even though it is pretty at the time, it does almost feel like this is tailor-made to bring on the misty eyes.
A little bit laid on a bit thick.
Yeah, it's laid on very thick, and I know it's elicited that response from a lot of people. There were a couple of moments where I was like, oh, okay, that's hit me a little bit in the chest, but it didn't quite get the eyes misty for me. But I mean, the music is somewhat pretty in keeping tonally with the film, so I could give it somewhat of a pass, although it did kind of irk me at times. And to be fair, like the actors, like even Ryan Reynolds, are playing things fairly straight. Like they're playing it straight enough where the performance in the script actually do, I think, feel fairly sincere and earnest. Enough that I don't think things grew eye-rollingly sentimental. There were times where I was like, "Oh, this is getting a bit syrupy. This feels like this feels like it is coming a bit from the cob." But it didn't get quite into like the territory of howls or anything like that. The emotional register of it's pitched quite nicely, and I think it's mostly about the appropriate level of sweetness for this kind of story, without laying it on too much. I think this is all well geared towards the themes about wonder, vulnerability, imagination having its place in life, even in the face of impending tragedy, even through times of emotional turbulence. Its approach to that is very surface level. It is quite one note, but it is a kids' film. It's sort of the kids' film that has the adult overtones that adults will be able to enjoy. But I'm not necessarily expecting it to, have Aaron Sorkin levels of depth in the dialogue or anything like that. Do you know what I mean?
The West Wing with Looney Tunes. Sorry, my brain just...
The Wire and Space Jam had a kid. I do have some issues that kind of keep it from being a home run. I think our worries about the imaginary friends and the execution of it were kind of well-founded. The execution of them, as much as I did sort of like want them to work, it's pretty rickety. Like, their introductory visual incorporations into the scenes are fairly seamless, like when they initially turn up and present themselves, but their designs are so storybook-esque, and the texture of the character models has this very heightened sheen and kind of plasticity to them. They look really plasticky, and it's to the extent where they don't really gel that well with the backgrounds of the scenes that are set in the real world. They look really CGI'd in.
Are they meant to? Are they meant to be more cartoony? A little bit like, Space Jam and things like that? Or is it that they're kind of a weird, uncanny valley halfway situation?
Yeah, it's. I feel like they were maybe trying to go for the cartoony Space Jam thing, but whereas the characters in Space Jam kind of almost, or Who Framed Roger Rabbit, for example, almost look kind of deliberately hand-drawn on the live action footage, kind of in that storybook tradition. It kind of works there. This needed to go further in that direction if it wanted to pull that off. It kind of hangs too much in this middle ground to the point where it just doesn't really quite look right, and was kind of distracting. And but the voice performances are very buoyant, and they do a good job of selling the individual personalities of the imaginary friends with vibrancy. But the mouth animations are very shaky while they're speaking. And in other sequences, I would actually just say that the VFX and the green screen is just straight up poor, considering the fact that this cost $110 million to make. I'm like, that could be down to, overworking and VFX artists not being given the right working conditions and pay is kind of rampant in the industry at the moment. So it could very much have been down to that. To that, I say to the production companies, do better. But yeah, I just, purely based on the height of the budget and what I saw on screen, pretty poor. But I do like this central idea of a team of people curating and matching imaginary friends to people who need that injection of joy into their lives. I think it's got a nice bit of world building, even though it does kind of feel like a bit sort of Foster's Home for imaginary friends, throwback to my childhood. So I think that's at least somewhat novel, but that doesn't entirely divert your attention from the fact that it doesn't really have a fraction of the detail or internal logic of something like Inside Out, which at times this does feel like a bit of a pale imitation of. And also, I do very much like the grace and tone, the grace and the visual style that it has. The cleanliness of the framing, though, the uniformity of the edit, the pervasiveness of that very saccharine and nostalgic score that I mentioned earlier. It does feel that at times like If has been almost kind of shamelessly engineered to try and make you cry. To that end, it does feel emotionally manipulative, but I do have to give major props to one thing though, and that's the ending, which I think is surprisingly smart considering how surface level the film has been up until that point. I don't want to say too much, but it has a very unexpectedly nifty plot twist, at least that I didn't see coming, and I'm normally very good at spotting this stuff. And it did actually quite intelligently reframe a large amount of what I'd seen, neatly wrapping up the themes we've kind of seen before, and also kind of simultaneously deepening that thematically with Kaylee Fleming's character. So some stuff really good, some stuff quite lackluster. But overall, I would say actually this in the end ended up being worthwhile. I would give it a B minus. I was kind of teetering on the edge at points, but I would say this was decent overall. I did come away from it liking it in the end.
Interesting. So, always surprises on this podcast. I would have said that Furiosa would be, ranked above If, but you never know until you go watch these things, Just because it's a quote unquote kids film doesn't mean that there isn't, merit to it or something good there. And I must admit, I quite like the premise more than I thought I would. So, if you need something to watch with the fam, not a bad option by the sounds of it. But we must move on to our final review, and that is The Fall Guy. This is Ryan Gosling's outing after playing Ken in Barbie. He's on top of the world right now, and he is picking up his comedy chops once again in this kind of rom-com action situation with Emily Blunt. And it looks like a lot of fun. And it looks like they've made a big deal about, the fact that stuntmen, there should be an Oscar for stunt people, and they had stunts performed at the premiere and things like that, all sorts of fun bits and bobs. But is it worth it? Is it a good film? Is it a decent watch? Let me know.
Yeah. So it offers quite a genuinely exciting prospect in the current cinematic landscape of remakes, reboots, and constant superhero vehicles. Here we have an original IP romantic action comedy that is big budget, two very likable stars, and kind of zeitgeisty, capturing that message around elevating stunt performers, in the public consciousness, thumbs up here. It seems very timely. And, Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, effortlessly likable leads. Hannah Waddingham is in this, who I'm a huge fan of, as I'm sure you are too. And yeah, I just think this could be a really good original summer blockbuster that really kind of got people out there and just having some straight fun. It is sad to say that as of right now, The Fall Guy has barely clawed back its production budget of 130 million at the worldwide box office. And whilst I do think, quality-wise, it isn't going to set the world on fire, it's sad to see the public not putting faith in a loud and good-hearted piece of entertainment like this. And it does kind of make me quite worried for the future, what the future may hold for this kind of film. The story centers on a stuntman, very successful, very popular stuntman in the industry, played by Ryan Gosling, who suffers an on-set accident that puts him out of work for a very long time and makes him feel very ashamed, and he kind of shuts off and neglects his, at the time, cameraman girlfriend, played by Emily Blunt, who breaks up with him, and the producer of the actor whose stunt double Ryan Gosling is, the producer is played by Hannah Waddingham. Aaron Taylor Johnson is the actor who is a total buffoon, complete narcissist, as just kind of caricature, which Ryan Gosling very much isn't. He has gone missing off the latest production he is on, and Hannah Waddingham calls Ryan Gosling up in desperation, saying, "I need you here to both be a stunt stand-in for him and also then to go and find him." He is like, absolutely not going to happen in a million years, and just goodbye, do not call me again. But then she says, but your ex-girlfriend Emily Blunt is directing. And he's like, when's the next play? So presented with a chance to rekindle and fix the relationship which he sadly let break down. And from there we get kind of a hijinks sort of romp whereby they're trying to get this film finished, and nefarious forces are trying to, keep the actor away, and they're trying to go on to this kind of crazy adventure to sort of find him, and, meanwhile sort of rekindle their romantic spark along the way. There's quite a bit to like here. Ryan Gosling's really well cast, shocker. I think what makes his performance style work so well here is that he's bringing a very smooth and refined fusion of that, sky-high level of zaniness we got from Ken in Barbie, and his kind of classically dour and taciturn demeanour, that we know him so well for. Think about things like La La Land, Drive, even his breakthrough role like Half Nelson. It kind of adds up to this effortlessly inviting charisma, a really jovial sense of humour. He's endearingly vulnerable. There's a really funny bit where Emily Blunt kind of sneaks up on him while he's in his car, sort of getting a bit emotional, remembering their past relationship while listening to All Too Well by Taylor Swift. That's a very sweet sequence. And his humorous bewilderment as he's befuddled by the madness of the increasingly crazy plot is very entertaining. And he's also kind of poking fun at proceedings in a manner that isn't like obnoxiously self-aware. Or kind of, look at this, I'm a stuntman and I'm being in a movie and this is kind of starting to look like a movie, what I'm actually having to do here. And yeah, it's not like that. It's kind of, it's pitched at the right level. There's lots of brash and very bombastic action sequences, with unsurprisingly impressive stunt work. There's a car crash in this that has now set the Guinness World Record for the most number of cannon rolls a car has done in a feature film. So great, good for them. Big thumbs up there. I mean, obviously stacked up against the likes of the Matt Fury Road, because, we've been talking about that this episode. There's nothing mind-blowingly balletic about the choreography here in the action. But the action's pretty serviceable for the most part. And there's one actually very entertaining fight sequences in an apartment that makes some good jokes from the use of very over-the-top prop weapons that are littered around the apartment, like blank guns and like fake swords and things like that. That's very kind of witty and enjoyable. And I do kind of wish that very cine-literate approach to comedy is something the Fall Guy had committed to more heavily. I feel it would have improved its sense of humour and given it kind of more uniqueness in the comedy pantheon. It's musical, romantic, and comedic, and even action swings are mostly pretty broad. They're pretty like palatable. The chemistry between Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt is very infectious. It's very breezy. But, it's a classic, down and out hero has to win back the girl you get the cold shoulder to. So, we've seen that kind of narrative trope before. And there are all these really like dad rock musical choices, like I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss, I Believe in a Thing Called Love by The Darkness, Thunderstruck by AC/DC turns up at the start of an action sequence. There's even, you'll like this, there's even a karaoke rendition by Emily Blunt of Against All Odds by Phil Collins that's intercut with an action sequence of Ryan Gosling on the back of a truck. It's
incredible.
Like it really was that.
That's
it
the
was
level
actually,
of cheese that I need in my action films.
Yeah, I enjoyed the cheese, but I did kind of go, yeah, it does make me roll my eyes a little bit. But I submitted to the corn of it, which it so it didn't like repel me too much. But although I was kind of just keenly waiting for Born to Be Wild by Steppenwolf to suddenly chime in. But I think even director David Lynch...
That would be even too far for that.
Yeah. I think even David Leitch, the director, realised that would have been a step too much.
On a side note, I wonder if he ever gets mistaken for David Lynch, and if so, how often does that take place? David Leitch. David Leitch. Oh, we thought we were getting David Lynch.
Yeah, we've got David Lynch at home. Type of joke. I think, at the end of the day, Fall Guy is a testament to a winning romantic pairing, good performances, and a tone that takes itself just seriously enough, but also just embraces the absurdity and the cheese of it enough that it makes a really, a decidedly palatable action comedy very enjoyable. I just wish there'd been, a few more risks, a more consistent satirical backbone in the writing. There's a voiceover narration in the opening that's very witty and kind of self-referential. I kind of wish that maybe that had been sustained more consistently in the script. The direction's quite straight-laced. It's quite measured. There's nothing. I almost wish the visual style of the film kind of echoed the wild motion of the stunts and the fight scenes. But to that, even then, there's a scene where Emily Blunt's kind of calling out directions to Ryan Gosling, and she's kind of making him do all these stunts as a form of kind of painful punishment for all the pain that he put her through. So there's moments of smartness and subtlety and kind of and comedic ingenuity in what's going on here. But yeah, mostly broad, but that isn't necessarily a totally bad thing in this case. I liked it. It's a B. It's a solid B. It's good. It's enjoyable. Not super stand out or anything, but if you're looking for something just to turn your brain off and have a good time, this will do that and then some.
I wonder if the part of the reason why it hasn't done so well in the cinemas is, I mean, just hearing you talk about it, there's a couple of things that kind of jump out to me. Is at first, the name of it, The Fall Guy, I just wonder if it's not quite grabbing people's imaginations. It also sounds a bit like a game. There's a game called Fall
Yeah.
Guys. I wonder if there was a bit of confusion. As an IP, I'm not sure that maybe the name just didn't quite do what it needed to do for it. The casting is inspired, it's a great cast, and I think that a lot of the draw to the film will be the cast. But I also think that, movies about making movies, that's a niche, I think. I don't think audiences like it much out, in the mainstream. I'm not sure that, movies about people making movies or about the movie industry hit with audiences that are maybe not inside that world. I think that maybe they can come off as a little bit cringy, a little bit self-congratulatory, or strange. Not that I'm saying that that's what this film is. I just think the perception of them in general is, that's something that does put me off sometimes. It's like, oh, it's a movie about making movies. So there's just a couple of things that I'm just like, seeing it marketed, because I'm the same with you. I'd like to see films like this do well. I'd like to see a return to, and I think that Barbie kind of did do this, where the actors are the draw, not the name of the studio. We've had a long time of like Marvel and DC and Disney kind of having the, an iron grip on the industry, because it's a Marvel film, we'll go to the cinema to see it. I'd much rather have, it's a Ryan Gosling film, or that's something that I want to see him do. So I think there is something in there. I just wonder if this was the vehicle for it, coming off that success, and whether or not that's kind of impacted its numbers overall.
Perhaps. I mean, I think what you say about the title is very valid. I think it's spot on. I mean, the title wasn't really pulling me in at all. I mean, the premise kind of was, but it just really highlighted the importance of a good title. There's been certain films where I like the cast, I like the premise, but the title of it kind of makes you go, it sort of almost pushes it towards the back of the pile.
Also, I think there
which,
was there was a Fall Guy TV show in like the 80s or something. I wonder if it's got some connections. Was it based on it?
I think this is loosely based on that. Kind of I think the TV show is a stuntman who becomes a bounty hunter. So I think there is a loose kind of connection there. And again, it's, kind of niche source material. I didn't know about that before having looked into this. So maybe there were some things that were kind of marked against it in terms of, mass audience appeal. But I still think it's of good quality, and I'm glad it didn't, completely flop. So we're hopefully this doesn't stop, future pieces of, good natured entertainment like this getting made.
Indeed. So that's it for this episode. What are some of the things being released? I can't promise that we'll get to them, because our release schedule is kind of, when we want, when we fancy it these days, when we're free, when we can do it and we enjoy it. But what is time? Yes. So we're gonna. What are some of the things that you're excited for coming up?
Well, I have to say, I'm interested kind of for the new sort of pairing of Deadpool and Wolverine. I think that could be a very
I'm excited. Sort of, I'm very excited for that.
There was a preview of that almost as kind of as part of the turn your phone off. They were sort of talking to camera, fourth wall breaking, Deadpool and Wolverine. So that was kind of smart. That was kind of inspired. And so I like the sound of that on-screen pairing. Do I really feel like we needed an Inside Out 2? No, but does the prospect of, I love Inside Out, so that excites me.
I'm excited for that one. I'm excited for, like, I don't know, there's something about those characters and this concept tackling puberty, like female puberty especially, in a I really hope that it pushes the idea and it goes full on with it. Because I think there's stuff there to explore that hasn't been done on film and hasn't been done in a kids' film, or like, their film for older kids before that I think could be interesting and really clever. So I'm excited for Inside Out 2. I really want to know what it does with it.
But, top of the pile in terms of excitement, the Garfield film.
Oh my god, no.
I think we're just gonna. Maybe I will. I mean, it's out now, so maybe that'll be next one. Maybe I will, for the good of our audience, because I'm so dedicated to my job.
Will you recover after watching that?
Maybe.
I don't know if I want you to go there.
But it's a risk I'm prepared to take.
Going to that dark night, sweet prince, never return. Oh,
we shall
okay.
see.
You know what? Now I'm scared. Now I'm scared for next episode.
Hey, you know what? If nothing else, we might get another godly rant.
We might get a good rant out of that one, but I don't know. I don't know if I want to put you through that. But you're a brave soul. You're a brave soul. So that's it for this week. We've got to wrap up. Thank you as always for listening. If you enjoy listening to us, then please check out our Instagram and our TikTok page, and we will be back at some point in the near future. Bye.